What happens when America's sweetheart faces off against a host who thinks he's untouchable? In just 36 seconds, one comment turned a friendly interview into an all-out war that ended with Julia Roberts storming off set, leaving Stephen Colbert speechless and the audience in complete shock. Before we get into this absolute disaster, make sure you hit that subscribe button right now, because we're pulling back the curtain on Hollywood's dark side, exposing entitled celebrities and their shocking behavior the cameras never showed you. We've got the raw footage they don't want you to see, and you won't want to miss a single reveal. Drop a comment and let us know what you think about this outrageous behavior. So let's set the scene. Julia Roberts walks onto the Late Show stage to what should have been a routine promotional appearance. She's there to talk about her latest film, smile on her face, ready to do what she's done 1,000 times before. The audience is cheering, the energy is high, and everything seems perfect. But what nobody in that studio knew was that this interview was about to go completely sideways in the worst way possible. Stephen Colbert starts off normal enough, doing his usual opening jokes, getting the crowd warmed up. Julia's laughing, playing along, being the professional she's always been. They talk about her new movie for a few minutes, and everything is going exactly how you'd expect. But then, out of nowhere, Colbert decides to take things in a different direction, and this is where things start to fall apart. "So Julia," Colbert says, leaning back in his chair with this smug look on his face, "I've been dying to ask you something. You've been in this business for what, like 40 years now?" Julia laughs a little, but you can see something shift in her expression. "Well, not quite 40, but yes, I've been doing this a long time." Right, Colbert continues, and there's this edge to his voice now. "So you've worked with pretty much everyone, all the big names, all the legends. Tell me something. Is it true that you're difficult to work with? Because I've heard some stories." The audience goes quiet. You can feel the tension immediately. Julia's smile doesn't quite reach her eyes anymore, and she shifts in her seat. "I'm not sure what you mean by that, Stephen. I think I'm pretty easy to work with. I show up, I do my job, I'm professional." But Colbert doesn't let it go. He actually doubles down. "Come on, you can be honest here. I mean, we've all heard the rumors, the demands, the diva behavior. I'm just saying, there's got to be some truth to it, right?" Now, most hosts would read the room at this point. Most hosts would see that their guest is uncomfortable and would pivot to something else. But not Colbert. He keeps pushing, and you can see Julia trying to keep her composure. She's a professional. She's been in this industry for decades, and she knows how to handle herself, but there's only so much anyone can take. "Stephen, I think you might be confusing me with someone else," Julia says, and her voice is calm but firm. "I've never been anything but respectful to everyone I work with. I don't know where you're getting your information from, but it's not accurate." The audience claps a little, supporting Julia, but Colbert just waves his hand dismissively. "Oh, come on. Every big star has their quirks, their demands. It's part of the job, right? I mean, you can't tell me you've never made someone's life difficult on set." And this is where you can really see Julia starting to get frustrated. Her jaw tightens, and she takes a deep breath before responding. "I don't appreciate what you're implying here. I've worked very hard to maintain good relationships with everyone in this industry. Directors, actors, crew members. I treat everyone with respect, and I expect the same in return." But instead of apologizing or moving on, Colbert actually laughs. He laughs, like this is all some big joke to him. "Wow, okay. Sensitive subject, I see. I'm just trying to have a fun conversation here, Julia. Lighten up a little." And that's when you can see something change in Julia's face. That smile she's been trying to maintain just disappears completely. "Fun?" she says, and her voice is sharp now. "You think it's fun to accuse someone of being difficult and unprofessional on national television? You think that's entertainment?" The audience is dead silent now. Everyone can feel that this has gone way past normal interview banter. This is real tension, real anger, and it's all happening live. Colbert seems to realize he's crossed a line, but instead of backing off, he tries to play it cool. "Hey, I'm just asking questions here. Isn't that what I'm supposed to do? Get the real stories?" "The real stories?" Julia repeats, and now she's leaning forward in her chair. "The real story is that you invited me here under the pretense of promoting my film, and instead you're using this time to spread false rumors and attack my character. That's the real story, Stephen." Colbert's face changes. He's not smiling anymore. He looks annoyed, maybe even a little angry that Julia is pushing back. "I'm not attacking anyone. I'm having a conversation. Maybe you're just not used to someone asking you the tough questions." "Tough questions?" Julia's voice rises slightly. "These aren't tough questions. These are baseless accusations. There's a difference. A good interviewer knows the difference." Now the audience is starting to react. Some people are gasping, others are murmuring to each other. This is not what anyone expected when they came to see a fun late-night talk show. This is uncomfortable. This is awkward. And it's getting worse by the second. Colbert tries to regain control. "Look, I think you're overreacting here. I was just trying to have a candid conversation about what it's like to be a big star in Hollywood. That's all." "No," Julia says firmly. "You were trying to make me look bad for ratings. You were trying to create drama where there isn't any. And I'm not going to sit here and let you do that." "Oh, so now I'm the bad guy?" Colbert says, and his tone is defensive now. "I'm just doing my job, Julia. Maybe you're the one who needs to calm down." And that's it. That's the moment. Julia stands up. She actually stands up from her chair, and the audience gasps collectively. "You know what, Stephen? I don't need to sit here and be disrespected like this. I came here as a professional, and I expected to be treated like one. Clearly, that's not going to happen." Colbert looks genuinely shocked now. "Wait, what are you doing?" "I'm leaving," Julia says simply. She starts removing her microphone, her hands moving quickly and decisively. "I'm not going to be part of whatever this is. You can explain to your viewers why your guest walked out." "Julia, come on," Colbert says, and now there's a hint of panic in his voice. "Don't be ridiculous. Sit back down. We can talk about something else." But Julia is already unclipping the mic pack from her waist. "I don't think so. You had your chance to be respectful, and you chose not to take it. So I'm making a choice too. I'm choosing to leave." The audience doesn't know how to react. Some people are still silent, stunned by what they're witnessing. Others are starting to applaud Julia, supporting her decision. The whole studio is in chaos, and Colbert is sitting there looking like he can't believe this is actually happening. "This is unbelievable," Colbert mutters, loud enough for the microphones to pick up. "You can't just walk off the show." Julia turns back to face him, microphone now in her hand. "Actually, I can. And I am. Maybe next time you'll think twice before you try to ambush a guest with fake stories and disrespectful questions." "Ambush?" Colbert's voice rises. "I wasn't ambushing anyone. This is my show. I get to ask whatever questions I want. And I get to decide whether I want to answer them." Julia shoots back. "That's how respect works, Stephen. Something you clearly don't understand." By now, the crew members are starting to move around, unsure of what to do. Do they go to commercial? Do they try to stop Julia? Do they let this play out? The whole production is falling apart in real time, and Colbert is still sitting in his chair, looking absolutely furious that his guest is standing up to him. "You're making a huge mistake," Colbert says, and his voice has this threatening quality to it now. "Walking off my show? That's not going to look good for you." Julia actually laughs at this, but it's not a friendly laugh. It's the kind of laugh that says she can't believe what she's hearing. "Not going to look good for me? Stephen, I just spent the last 10 minutes defending myself against your baseless attacks. I think the audience can see pretty clearly who's in the wrong here." And she's right. The audience is definitely on her side now. People are cheering for her, shouting words of support. Some people are even booing Colbert, which clearly makes him even more upset. "This is so unprofessional," Colbert says, shaking his head. "I've had hundreds of guests on this show, and nobody has ever acted like this." "Maybe that's because you've never treated anyone else like this," Julia responds. "Maybe you thought you could get away with it because I'm nice, because I usually don't make waves. But I'm not going to sit here and smile while you try to tear me down for entertainment." Colbert stands up now too, and he looks genuinely angry. "I wasn't tearing you down. I was asking questions. That's literally my job." "Your job is to interview people, not to attack them," Julia says. "There's a difference, and if you can't see that, then that's your problem, not mine." The two of them are just standing there now, facing each other across the desk, and the tension is absolutely electric. Everyone in the studio is watching, waiting to see what happens next. This is the kind of moment that you can't script, the kind of raw, real confrontation that almost never happens on live television. "You know what your problem is?" Colbert says, and his voice is cold now. "You can't handle it when someone doesn't worship the ground you walk on. You're so used to everyone treating you like you're special that you fall apart the second someone asks you a real question." Julia's eyes widen. "A real question? You call spreading rumors and making accusations a real question? That's not journalism, Stephen. That's just mean-spirited gossip." "Oh, please," Colbert scoffs. Don't act like you're above it all. You're an actor. Your whole life is about image and perception. I'm just pointing out the truth." "The truth?" Julia's voice is incredulous now. "You don't know anything about the truth. You just know what gets you ratings. And apparently, that includes attacking your guests when they're vulnerable." "Vulnerable?" Colbert laughs harshly. "You're one of the biggest stars in the world. You're not vulnerable. You're just not used to being challenged." "There's a difference between being challenged and being disrespected," Julia says, and her voice is steady despite how upset she clearly is. "And what you did tonight was disrespectful. To me, to your audience, and to yourself." Colbert's face is red now. "Get out then. If you want to leave so badly, just go. We don't need you here." "I'm already gone," Julia says. She drops the microphone on his desk with a loud thud that echoes through the studio. "Good luck explaining this to your producers." And with that, she turns and walks off the stage. Just walks right off, past the cameras, past the stunned crew members, and disappears into the back. The audience erupts into a mixture of applause and shocked gasps. Some people are cheering for Julia. Others are just sitting there with their mouths open, unable to believe what they just witnessed. Colbert is left standing there, alone at his desk, looking absolutely furious and embarrassed. He tries to recover, tries to say something to the camera, but he's clearly rattled. "Well," he finally manages, "I guess that's one way to end an interview." But nobody's laughing. The audience isn't buying his attempt to play it off as no big deal. They just watched him berate and disrespect one of the most beloved actors in Hollywood. And then they watched her stand up for herself and walk away with her dignity intact. And everyone in that room knows who was in the wrong. The camera cuts away quickly, probably going to commercial. But the damage is already done. What was supposed to be a simple promotional interview turned into a complete disaster, all because Colbert couldn't resist trying to create drama at his guests' expense. But let's talk about what really happened here, because this goes deeper than just one bad interview. This is about the culture of talk shows, about hosts who think they're untouchable, who think they can say whatever they want because they're the ones holding the microphone. Colbert came into this interview with an agenda. He wanted to make Julia look bad, wanted to catch her off guard, wanted to create a viral moment that people would talk about. And he got his viral moment, just not in the way he expected. What he didn't count on was Julia refusing to play along. He thought she'd just laugh it off, thought she'd deflect and move on like guests usually do when hosts cross the line. But Julia didn't do that. She called him out. She stood up for herself. She showed everyone watching that you don't have to accept disrespect just because someone has a television show. And that's what makes this moment so powerful. Because how many times have we watched interviews where the guest is clearly uncomfortable, where the host is clearly pushing too far, and the guest just smiles and bears it because that's what they're supposed to do? How many times have we seen celebrities get ambushed with rude questions or false accusations, and they just laugh it off, because making a scene would be worse than enduring the disrespect? Julia Roberts said no to all of that. She said, "This is not okay, and I'm not going to pretend it is." And the audience loved her for it, because everyone who was watching could see exactly what was happening. They could see Colbert being unnecessarily aggressive and confrontational. They could see him refusing to back down even when it was clear he'd crossed a line. They could see him getting defensive and angry when Julia pushed back. Think about how this interview started. Julia came out smiling, ready to promote her film, ready to have a good time. She wasn't looking for a fight. She wasn't being difficult or demanding. She was being professional. But Colbert immediately went on the attack. He brought up rumors about her being difficult to work with, rumors that have been floating around for years with no real substance behind them. And when Julia tried to politely correct him, tried to set the record straight, he doubled down. He kept pushing, kept insisting that there must be some truth to these stories. And then, when Julia finally started to push back, when she finally started to show that she was upset by his questions, Colbert had the nerve to tell her she was overreacting. He tried to make it seem like she was the problem, like she was being too sensitive, like she couldn't take a joke. This is classic manipulation. This is what people do when they know they're in the wrong but don't want to admit it. They turn it around on the other person. They make the victim seem like the aggressor. But Julia didn't fall for it. She saw exactly what he was doing, and she called it out. When Colbert said she was overreacting, she pointed out that his questions weren't tough questions. They were baseless accusations. When he said she needed to calm down, she pointed out that she was simply expecting to be treated with respect. Every time he tried to deflect or minimize what he was doing, she countered with clarity and truth. And you know what really got under Colbert's skin? The fact that Julia wouldn't back down. You could see it in his face, in his body language. in the way his voice changed. He was getting angrier and angrier because his usual tactics weren't working. He's used to being the one in control. He's used to guests deferring to him, accepting his framing of the conversation, playing by his rules. But Julia refused to do that. She set her own boundaries and enforced them. When she stood up and started taking off her microphone, Colbert's whole demeanor changed. Suddenly, he wasn't the confident talk show host anymore. He was panicking. He knew this was going to be a disaster for him. He knew that millions of people were watching one of the biggest stars in Hollywood walk off his show, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. He tried to downplay it, tried to act like it was no big deal, but everyone could see the panic in his eyes. And then, he made it worse by trying to threaten her, telling her it wouldn't look good for her to walk off the show. That was a desperate attempt to regain some control, to make her think twice about leaving. But it backfired completely, because Julia just laughed at him. She saw right through that weak attempt at intimidation, and she threw it back in his face. She pointed out that anyone watching could see who was really in the wrong. The audience's reaction proved her right. They weren't on Colbert's side. They weren't sitting there thinking Julia was being unreasonable or dramatic. They were cheering for her. They were supporting her decision to leave. They recognized that she was being mistreated and that she was standing up for herself, and they respected her for it. Let's talk about that final exchange, because it really shows the difference between these two people. Colbert, even after everything that had happened, still couldn't admit he was wrong. He still tried to justify his behavior by saying it was his job to ask questions. He still tried to frame Julia as the problem, as someone who couldn't handle being challenged, who needed everyone to worship her. He went for personal attacks because he had nothing else left. But Julia stayed calm and focused. She didn't get pulled into name-calling or petty insults. She simply stated the facts. She pointed out the difference between challenging someone and disrespecting them. She called out his behavior for what it was, mean, spirited, and designed to get ratings at her expense. She maintained her dignity even as he lost his. And when he finally told her to leave, when he said, "We don't need you here," Julia had the perfect response. "I'm already gone." She didn't argue with him. She didn't try to get the last word in some petty back and forth. She just left. She dropped the microphone on his desk and walked away, leaving him standing there looking foolish and exposed. That microphone drop, by the way, is going to be remembered as one of the most iconic moments in talk show history. The sound of it hitting that desk, that final punctuation on her exit, was perfect. It was powerful. It said everything that needed to be said without her having to speak another word. The aftermath in the studio must have been absolute chaos. The producers probably lost their minds. The crew probably didn't know what to do, and Colbert probably spent the rest of the night trying to figure out how to spin this in his favor. But there was no spinning this. Everyone saw what happened. Everyone saw him push a guest too far, saw him refuse to back down when called out, saw him get angry and defensive when his guest stood up for herself. This is what happens when someone in power forgets that respect is a two-way street. Colbert thought that because it was his show, his stage, his microphone, he could say whatever he wanted. He thought that his position as host gave him the right to attack his guests, to make them uncomfortable, to create drama for entertainment. But Julia reminded him that guests have power too. They have the power to say no. They have the power to leave. They have the power to refuse to participate in their own humiliation. And that's an important lesson for everyone, not just talk show hosts. Just because someone has a platform doesn't mean they can use it to hurt people. Just because someone is in a position of authority doesn't mean they can abuse that authority. And just because someone is usually agreeable and professional doesn't mean they'll accept disrespect indefinitely. Julia Roberts showed millions of people that it's okay to stand up for yourself. It's okay to say no when someone crosses a line. It's okay to walk away from a situation where you're not being treated with respect. And she did it with grace and dignity, never stooping to Colbert's level, never losing her composure completely, but still making it crystal clear that his behavior was unacceptable. The fact that the audience was on her side throughout this whole thing shows that people recognize respect when they see it, and they recognize disrespect too. They could tell that Colbert was being unnecessarily aggressive. They could tell that his questions had an edge to them, that he was trying to provoke a reaction rather than have a genuine conversation. And when Julia finally had enough and left, they understood why. They didn't think she was being a diva or being difficult. They thought she was being reasonable. This moment is going to be talked about for years. It's going to be studied in media classes as an example of what not to do as an interviewer. It's going to be referenced whenever someone talks about the power dynamics in Hollywood, about how hosts treat their guests, about what happens when someone finally says enough is enough. And every time someone brings it up, Julia's going to come out looking like the hero, and Colbert is going to come out looking like the villain, because that's what he was in this situation. He was the antagonist. He was the one who created the conflict. He was the one who pushed and pushed until his guest had no choice but to leave, and he has nobody to blame but himself. What's really interesting is how quickly things escalated. One minute they're having what seems like a normal interview, and the next minute, Julia's walking off the stage. It all happened so fast, but if you watch it back, you can see the warning signs. You can see Julia's discomfort building. You can see her trying to redirect the conversation, trying to give Colbert an out, trying to salvage the interview. But he didn't take any of those opportunities. He kept pushing, kept insisting, kept making it worse. And that's the thing about crossing lines. Sometimes you don't realize you've crossed them until it's too late. But Colbert should have known better. He's been doing this job for years. He's interviewed thousands of people. He knows how to read a room, how to tell when someone is uncomfortable, how to pivot when things are going south. But he chose not to. He chose to keep pushing because he thought it would make for better television. He chose drama over respect, ratings over relationships. Well, he got his drama. He got his viral moment, but it's not going to be remembered the way he wanted it to be. It's going to be remembered as the time he disrespected Julia Roberts so badly that she walked off his show. It's going to be remembered as the time his ego got in the way of his professionalism. It's going to be remembered as a cautionary tale about what happens when you forget that your guests are human beings who deserve to be treated with respect. Julia, on the other hand, is going to be remembered as the person who stood up to him, who refused to be bullied, who walked away with her head held high, who showed everyone watching that you don't have to accept mistreatment just because someone has power over the platform. That's a powerful message, and it's one that resonates with people. Think about all the times you've seen someone being disrespected and wish they would stand up for themselves. Think about all the times you've been in a situation where someone was pushing your boundaries and you didn't know how to respond. Julia showed us all how to respond. You state your boundaries clearly. You call out disrespect when you see it. And if the other person won't change their behavior, you remove yourself from the situation. It's simple, but it's not easy. It takes courage to stand up to someone, especially someone with power and influence. But Julia had that courage, and she used it. And in doing so, she created a moment that's going to inspire people for years to come. A moment that shows that respect isn't optional, that dignity matters, that you don't have to put up with someone treating you badly just because they have a television show. The look on Colbert's face when she dropped that microphone and walked away said it all. He knew he'd messed up. He knew this was going to follow him. He knew that no matter how he tried to spin it, everyone was going to remember this as the interview where he went too far, where his guest walked out on him, where he lost control of his own show because he couldn't control his own ego. And that's really what this comes down to. Ego. Colbert's ego got in the way of everything else. He thought he could say whatever he wanted. He thought he could push as hard as he wanted. He thought that being the host meant he was in charge, that he had all the power. But he forgot that power is only real if other people accept it. And Julia didn't accept it. She rejected his authority over her, rejected his right to disrespect her, and walked away. That's real power. Not the artificial power of having a microphone and a camera and an audience. Real power is knowing your worth and refusing to let anyone diminish it. Real power is standing up for yourself even when it's uncomfortable, even when it might have consequences, even when everyone is watching. Julia had that power, and she used it beautifully. The contrast between the two of them in that moment couldn't be more stark. Julia, calm and collected even in her anger, clearly stating her position, maintaining her dignity. Colbert, flustered and defensive and angry, lashing out because he lost control of the situation. One person acting with grace under pressure, the other person falling apart. One person standing up for their values, the other person revealing their lack of character. This is the moment that defines both of them, at least in this context. For Julia, it's a moment of strength and integrity. For Colbert, it's a moment of weakness and poor judgment. And those definitions are going to stick because they're based on actions, on choices, on behavior that everyone saw with their own eyes. You can't spin this. You can't rewrite it. You can't make it look like anything other than what it was. A talk show host disrespecting his guest, and that guest refusing to tolerate it. The evidence is right there, recorded, witnessed by hundreds of people in the studio and millions watching at home. There's no ambiguity, no room for interpretation. It happened exactly the way it appeared to happen. And that's why this moment matters so much. Because it's real. It's not scripted. It's not rehearsed. It's not part of some publicity stunt. It's two people having a genuine conflict, and one of them handling it with grace while the other one falls apart. It's a reminder that who we are under pressure, how we treat people when things get difficult, that's what really matters. That's what people remember. Colbert showed us who he is when he doesn't get his way. When someone pushes back against him. When his usual tactics don't work. He showed us that he values his ego more than his relationships, his image more than his integrity, winning the moment more than doing the right thing. And that's not a good look for anyone, but especially not for someone who presents himself as thoughtful and progressive and respectful. Julia showed us who she is too. She showed us that she won't accept disrespect, even from someone powerful. She showed us that she values her dignity more than avoiding conflict. She showed us that she's willing to face consequences for standing up for herself. And those are the qualities we want to see in people we admire, in people we look up to, in people we want to support. The fact that this all played out on live television makes it even more powerful. There was no editing, no chance to soften it or change it or make it look different. What you saw was what happened. And what happened was a masterclass in how to handle someone who's treating you badly. Stay calm, state your boundaries, call out the behavior, and if it doesn't stop, remove yourself from the situation. Julia did all of that perfectly. Meanwhile, Colbert demonstrated everything you shouldn't do. He escalated instead of de-escalating. He got defensive instead of listening. He attacked instead of apologizing. He tried to intimidate instead of showing respect. And he ended up looking foolish and petty and mean-spirited, all because he couldn't handle being called out for his behavior. This interview was supposed to be about Julia's new film. That's why she was there. That's what she agreed to talk about. But Colbert decided to make it about something else entirely. He decided to make it about tearing her down, about creating drama, about getting a reaction. And he got his reaction, just not the one he wanted. He wanted her to get defensive and flustered. He wanted her to fumble and stumble and make herself look bad. He wanted to be the clever host who caught the big star off guard and got her to reveal something embarrassing or controversial. But instead, he revealed his own character flaws. He revealed his own pettiness and his own disrespect. And she revealed her strength and her dignity and her unwillingness to be pushed around. That's why this moment resonates with so many people. Because we've all been in situations where someone treated us badly and we didn't know how to respond. We've all wished we had the courage to stand up for ourselves the way Julia did. We've all wanted to walk away from someone who was disrespecting us but felt like we couldn't. Julia showed us that we can, that we should, that our dignity and self-respect are worth more than avoiding an awkward moment. The ripple effects of this are going to be felt for a long time. Other talk show hosts are going to think twice before they try to ambush their guests. Other guests are going to feel more empowered to push back when hosts cross lines. Other people watching are going to be inspired to stand up for themselves in their own lives. One moment, one interview, one decision to say, enough is enough, and suddenly, everything changes. That's the power of standing up for yourself. That's the power of refusing to accept disrespect. That's the power of knowing your worth and demanding that others recognize it too. Julia Roberts showed us all of that in one stunning, unforgettable moment. And Stephen Colbert showed us what happens when you forget that respect is earned, not demanded, and that power without respect is just bullying. This is going to be the interview that people remember, not because it was funny or entertaining in the way interviews are supposed to be, but because it was real, because it showed us something true about both of these people, because it gave us a moment that actually meant something beyond just promotion and entertainment. And when people look back at this, they're going to see Julia as the hero of the story. The person who stood up for herself, the person who refused to be pushed around, the person who walked away rather than compromise her dignity. That's the legacy of this moment. That's what people are going to remember. Not Colbert's questions or his justifications or his attempts to save face. Just Julia, standing up, taking off that microphone, and walking away. That image is going to be iconic. That moment is going to be referenced forever. And it's all because she had the courage to say no.